Once again, this fight was on DAZN, and since DAZN has been targeting my channel by copyright striking all of my videos on their fights, this video will have no footage of the fight and will only use screenshots from the fight. For the full film study with video footage, I will be uploading it to my Patreon later this week, which you could join for as little as $1. It helps keep the channel going, and with that said, onto the video. So the first thing I'm going to be talking about is the big elephant in the room, the thing you'll hear everyone talking about from this fight, and that's the left hook knockdown Canelo scored on Berlanga in round 3. This shot was the result of Canelo conditioning Berlanga over the first 2 rounds. You see, Canelo came out in round 1, and many of the punches he threw were his signature left shovel hook, where he winds up low to make it look like a left hook to the body, only for him to redirect it upwards to land on the head. He's tricked many opponents in previous fights with this punch, making them drop their guards before connecting on their chins. However, Berlanga managed to block these hooks, not falling for the fake body shot by dropping his guard. From there in round 2, Canelo made the adjustment and switched his looping hook to a jab up the middle, since Berlanga was catching all of the shovel hooks. However, actually landing the jab is easier said than done when Berlanga is significantly longer than Canelo. Canelo didn't simply just start throwing the jab instead of the hook. It all starts with his footwork. I talk about in every video I make on Canelo Alvarez how he closes the distance and puts pressure on his longer, taller opponents by unconventionally stepping his rear foot forward first when stepping forward. This allows him to set up traps, like sneaking his lead foot into punching range while leaning back to make it look like he's still out of range so that he could sneak punches in on his unsuspecting opponents. Or he could lean in before he steps forward to make him look closer than he is so that he could bait punches that he could pull and counter. Or simply catch the punches on his guard to slowly tire his opponents out. The reason I'm bringing this up is because at this point all of Canelo's opponents know about this tactic he employs. They no longer fall for this trap of leaning in to bait punches, and they will opt to do nothing when Canelo does this. Berlanga did exactly this, and Canelo counters this by exploding with a long-range jab that catches his opponents off guard. This is exactly what he started doing to Berlanga, as you see his leaning forward, showing his guard, inviting Berlanga to punch, and when Berlanga doesn't take the bait, Canelo surprises him with a jab. So Berlanga, still focused on the left hook, was getting hit by several of these jabs from Canelo, and right before the knockdown in round 3, Canelo goes for another jab after leaning in and not baiting anything from Berlanga. Canelo lands this jab, however Berlanga attempts to counter it and just barely missed the timing. Canelo could tell that Berlanga is catching on to him and is probably ready to counter the next jab. Now the trap is ready to be sprung. Berlanga is conditioned to the jab instead of the hook now, so now Canelo can go back to the hook that he wanted to land in round 1, and does exactly this. He slams a hook in on Berlanga's chin, who was caught reaching to parry a jab that never came. You could tell by the way Berlanga was smiling and banging his gloves that he knew exactly how he was just tricked. The next thing I want to talk about is how Berlanga actually had some success utilizing a stiff, well-timed jab throughout the fight. He made pretty good use of his height and reach advantage to sneak in jabs while moving laterally to hit Canelo before he could set his feet. He would also use his jab to counter Canelo's jab, since like I said, he now has a better feel for the timing of Canelo's jab off of his lean-in bait. And most importantly, he would use his jab to push Canelo off balance by timing his jab off of Canelo's rear foot step forward. Exactly what Dimitri Bivol did to neutralize Canelo's offense. This was done by jabbing when Canelo leans forward, and this is because Canelo uses the lean-in to hide his rear foot step. This allowed Berlanga to catch Canelo with his rear foot mid-air. However, after the Bivol fight, Canelo made the adjustment of taking smaller steps forward, which not only hides his steps better, but also prevents him from getting caught in a narrow stance where he will easily get pushed off balance, like Bivol did to him. The thing is, Berlanga's jab wasn't enough to completely neutralize Canelo's offense. Canelo's pressure left Berlanga constantly moving backwards, and eventually on the ropes where Canelo would get some good work off. Most importantly, Canelo would land punches on Berlanga's left arm along the ropes, and while admittedly I was never a firm believer in the effectiveness of the strategy Canelo does, But shortly after Canelo would land a big shot on his arm, Berlanga's jab output would suddenly drop drastically for a good chunk of time, as you could see his probing with his right hand instead of his left hand here. This allowed Canelo to get in on Berlanga and get off more punches on him. The last thing I want to talk about is how while Berlanga did do a good job patiently picking his shots, he wasn't very defensively responsible after the punches were thrown. Berlanga would throw and not use any control to prevent return fire from Canelo. He didn't use his feet to create space or smother. He didn't move his head to avoid return fire. He would throw his shots and then stand there, allowing Canelo to hit him with return fire or even counter him. This allowed Canelo to get the better of Berlanga in many of the rounds. And that's going to do it for this one. Again, if you want to see my full film study on the fight, I will be uploading it to my Patreon. And to DAZN, if you're watching this, it doesn't need to be this way. Just shoot me an email. Let's work out a deal. I know you don't want to copyright strike me every time. I definitely don't want to have to counter them every time, but I definitely will every time, and I will win every time I counter them. But reach out to me. I see you guys are working with other YouTubers. I'm open to talking, so let's do it. And as always, thank you to all my GOAT tier patrons: Jason Maheenan, Grant Gabriel, Albert Chen, Gostali Geza, Marshall Bott, Jesus Galindo, Nyan Valdez, MSM Neal, RC, Daniel Contreras, Lionel Johnson, Val Ravenheim, Jacob McMillan, and JJJR. You guys keep the channel going, as well as my channel member Lucas Miller. I'll see you guys all in the next one.